Well, good day, dear friends. I'm glad to welcome you to our course, Effective Delegation. And today we have the first session, Introduction to Delegation. We will get acquainted with what it is. Why is it necessary to learn to delegate? Of course, you can try to do everything yourself, not delegate anything, for example, while sacrificing personal time and sometimes even relationships. Or you can learn to delegate and once and for all free up your own time by giving tasks to those who should be tasked. By managing to do more, you can always earn more because those who work well earn more. This is the course website, and I'll tell you a little about myself. My name is Mike Pritula. I worked at Alpha Bank on the STB channel, at Wargaming, at Preplay, at Ideals, and I learned to delegate when I became a manager. Initially, I had a team of 10 people. Then it became a team of 20 people because I was promoted and also given the HR department. And then I realized that as a manager, I was getting a lot of tasks, but I, as a manager, couldn't complete them all. That is, I physically can't do everything, although some tasks were, kind of at the manager's level. That's when I started learning to delegate. At first, it was difficult, unfamiliar, but I had no choice. And as I learned to delegate, my method improved. I started reading books, taking courses, and since then, you could say that when I learned to delegate, I became a full-fledged leader, not just a coordinator of my employees who work there with me. Further, during my entire career, as I developed and built my career, I received various prizes, won in different categories. I was published in a magazine. And at work, I was quite proactive. Yes, I received various certificates, spoke at conferences, and also received 3 international certifications. Briefly about myself. Our academy has also existed for a long time, has many students, has trained more than 10,000, and has students from many countries, 50 countries. A high loyalty level at 80%, and there are also awards. We have a silver play button from YouTube, and we have local awards. In my work, I rely on the best global practices and my personal experience, so it's always a combination. I can do something on my own, and knowing how it's done, I watch how some international companies do it. Under this video on YouTube, when you watch it, I would appreciate it if you write your position and where you are from. In this course, there is homework that will help you develop skills. For this homework, once completed and accepted, we will issue you a diploma. We issue the diploma on a great platform. It's the Accredible platform, a digital one, and you can add it to LinkedIn or download it, whatever is convenient for you. The course itself consists of 4 sessions. Today is the introduction. Then in the second session, we will go through the delegation process in detail, step by step. In the third session, we will talk about developing employees' skills through delegation. And in the fourth, delegation and time management. This is our course plan. Today, there will be key points about delegation. I won't dwell on the program here because you will see it all for yourself. So, let's start with what delegation is. What is generally meant by it? It is a popular word, a word commonly heard, but we do not always mean the same thing. So delegation is the process of transferring authority to perform tasks from a manager to an employee. This is such an interesting formulation. It scares many people because the supervisor is ready to delegate the task to the employee, but it's frightening to transfer certain authorities. And when we analyze the step-by-step delegation model in the course, we will see that it's actually not scary. There are indeed ways to make it comfortable, to make it safe, to make it effective, to adapt to the employee. Because as you will see later in this course, delegating to different employees happens differently. That is, it is not always the same format, there are nuances. Moving on, the main goals of delegation: distributing the manager's time and developing the employee's competence. Sometimes managers feel that when they delegate, they put pressure on employees. That is, they perceive something under delegation as something good for the managers themselves, but not very good for the employees. Although this is a mistaken belief, and I am sure it prevents many from delegating effectively, it seems to us when we give our work to employees as we think it's ours, then employees reluctantly take it and it stresses them. In fact, it's not really our job, because the task of leaders is not to do everything that piles up on them. Secondly, it's not a burden for employees either, because if they do not take on any new tasks, especially those performed by managers, employees will not develop. Therefore, for employees, there isn't a universally standard employee, because employees can be different. Some won't want to do anything, regardless of whether you delegate or not. But we're not talking about those employees. We're talking about regular, normal employees. For them, it's interesting. Next, there are different styles of delegation and different management styles. We say delegation, but what is the opposite of delegation? The opposite of delegation is micromanagement. We will talk about him today. And in such a very authoritarian, autocratic management style, when the leader clearly and strictly tells what to do without explaining the whole sequence of actions, but stands right behind and says, like, imagine that without delegating, the employee needs to prepare a report. The manager stands behind them, says, okay, open Excel, opened it, good, create a new document, created it, excellent. Place the cursor in the first cell, write sales. Second cell, months. Third cell, something else there. Yes, and there, behind, saying every step. This is anti-delegation, this is micromanagement, this is an autocratic management style. Well, there is also, it's not even considered a management style. I would call it detached, yes, when the manager doesn't interact with the team at all, and the team tries to figure out what to do on their own. But that's anti-management. That shouldn't be there at all. Here, the correct approach is still management, but it can vary. Yes, the classic division of management is autocratic and delegating, or as they say, democratic. Well, accordingly, in the autocratic style of management, the manager's authority is the highest, while in the democratic style, the employee's degree of freedom is the highest. For those who need a translation, there is a translation of this model. Well, and accordingly, the steps that a leader goes through, what we will learn to do in the second session. Commanding is the first step. It's autocratic. Selling, proposing, consulting, connecting, delegating, and observing. Some managers immediately try to delegate everything to employees. They realize it doesn't work, they get burned, the employees do nothing and become disillusioned with delegation. But the problem isn't that delegation doesn't work. The problem is that the chosen approach to delegation doesn't work. Because you need to know how to delegate. It's not difficult, it can be learned. You can master it beautifully in 4 sessions. Well, let's move on. I'll leave this here as an outline, describing data of 4 styles. More precisely, not 4, but 8. But we will move on because we will talk in detail about how these approaches work a bit later in a separate session. What else is important to understand about why delegation is necessary? There are companies in the world that are quite successful. For example, a company like Google. I am sure that there is probably no person who does not know such a company. For the company Google, the skill of delegation. For leaders, it is the number 2 skill among the top 10 skills of leaders. The first is to be a good coach, which is actually very closely linked, very closely associated with delegation, because in this course we will explore coaching as a tool for delegation. And in second place, it's called inspiring the team and not micromanaging. That is, Google selects such leaders. Google trains such leaders. Google doesn't just believe they have scientifically proven. They conducted a massive study. This study was later published as Project Oxygen. They conducted a massive study where they proved that leaders who possess and consistently apply the 10 competencies are the most successful and their teams are the most effective. Therefore, delegation is an important skill. Let's move on. Google has its own 7-step delegation process. It's very interesting. Let's take a look at it to make a first acquaintance with delegation. Our course is structured in such a way that each subsequent session reveals a new layer of delegation. By the fourth session, you will have a crystal clear understanding of what delegation is. So what does Google teach its managers about delegation? They recommend a 7-step process where the first step, give an overview of the work. They recommend the following: discuss the scope and significance of the project. Explain to the employee why you chose them and the impact this work has on the business. This clearly shows the employee the importance of what is being delegated to them. Second, describe the details of the new responsibility. Discuss the desired outcome and clarify expectations. Tell the employee what you expect, but not how to do it. It is important to give them autonomy and freedom so they can learn and grow from the experience rather than just follow orders. 3, ask questions, respond, and suggest. The conversation should be two-way. Remember that the ultimate goal is to put the employee in the driver's seat. Ensure they have all the necessary information to take responsibility and meet expectations. Listen to the feedback from the delegated employee and respond with understanding. For your employee, this is new and uncharted territory. Calm their anxiety and create a psychologically safe environment. Which employee will feel comfortable expressing their concerns, discussing doubts, and turning to you for help? By the way, I can say that there is a separate study by Google about a psychologically safe environment. They also consider it a very important component. 5th, explain how this impacts the team. For employees to understand the importance of their work and prioritize accordingly, be sure to connect the dots and explain how the task supports other team initiatives. This could encourage you. Employees will not take full responsibility until you encourage them to do so. Make sure they understand that you trust them to achieve the result. 7. Set checkpoints, outcomes, deadlines, and ways to monitor progress. Make sure that despite having autonomy, employees know which critical milestones they need to reach and what success looks like to assess progress. And Google confirms that yes, delegating authority is not the simplest task. Let's move on. Delegation increases the autonomy and efficiency of the team while reducing micromanagement. Micromanagement is a harmful management style that, like in this picture, ties the team's hands and feet because the team cannot move until the manager approves something. I have encountered micromanagers in my work, and I have had supervisors who were micromanagers to varying degrees, but the story I heard about my former colleague surprised me the most. My former colleague once went to work at an IT company where the manager was such a micromanager that, get this, the manager personally approved the birthday greeting cards for employees which were prepared by the HR team. There were about 500 employees. He personally approved each one, but he didn't just read and say, okay, he sent it back for revisions. There could be from 10 to 15 rounds of revisions to one card for one employee. Can you imagine such a micromanager? This management style led to the following. All decisions in the company depended on him, so he set a schedule until 7 in the evening. He worked only with developers, solving their questions. Everyone else, including HR, could come to him only after 7, but there was a line. HR team, my former colleague was telling me, the HR team, for example, could schedule a meeting at 11, as it was the earliest available time. 11 in the evening, waiting until midnight for the manager to be free from other prolonged meetings, and then spend another half an hour discussing a postcard. Can you imagine how absurd that is? Therefore, delegation is like a vaccine against micromanagement. Moving on, there is the leadership model by Hersey Blanchard called situational leadership, and in this model, delegation is considered an important aspect of employee development depending on their maturity. Ken Blanchard, in his model, does not say that you should immediately delegate everything to employees. He talks about employees going through 4 stages of development. An employee starts, we're talking about a new task, a new project, new responsibilities when an employee starts something new. An employee has high motivation but usually low competence in this matter. And the task of the manager is to be very directive in the first stage as the employee begins working on a new task or project or responsibility. Motivation starts to decline because the employee encounters the first failures, while competence gradually increases, and here the task of the manager is to support and act as a mentor. Then the employee's competence increases and motivation slowly begins to recover, and the manager starts to slightly reduce support, directive approach, and over time, the employee understands the new task and new responsibility. Motivation is high again, competence is high, and here the employee, or rather the manager, fully delegates the task to the employee. Therefore, delegation is considered as part of the employee development system and part of the situational leadership or situational management system that should be used by managers. Delegation also improves the quality of decisions by leveraging the knowledge and experience of the team. Leaders often think they are the smartest, that they know more than anyone else, but they forget that it cannot be that they are smarter than each team member. But first, when hiring employees, it is very important to hire people who are better than you in something. Yes, there are managers who specifically hire very weak employees so that they are easy to manage, but that is not standard practice. The normal practice is still to hire strong employees, and then these employees might truly have more knowledge in some areas. Moreover, some of our employees have worked in other companies where at least some process might have been better implemented than ours. They know this process, they can tell us about it. An employee might not be very smart or very developed by themselves, but they can carry information like a USB stick. Yes, they saw it and they can recount it. Further, the impact of delegation on team productivity. Personally, effective delegation can increase a manager's productivity by about 20%. If we take all these things that increase productivity, we'll take delegation, we'll take the ability to use artificial intelligence, we'll take working in the talent zone for a leader. When we apply all this simultaneously, then a leader can be twice as effective. Let's add time management here, for example. That is, productivity is one of those small components, yes. I would depict it as a kind of vitamin or steroid, as they say next. So a manager on steroids who can significantly boost a leader, especially when needed, like athletes before the Olympics. They need peak performance, and leaders experience this too. Sometimes a business enters a tough business season when everything is fast-paced, all deadlines are tight. I worked in television. There were 2 seasons a year, autumn and spring. In the summer, everyone usually took a break and didn't watch much television, but people watched intensely. In the fall, from the 1st of September to New Year's, then in January, they did not watch TV as much. And then in the spring, around the end of February, March, the season starts and goes until May, until the end of May. And during that time, everything happened and you had to be at the peak of your abilities. Further delegation allows focusing on strategic tasks and improves the quality of decisions, because there are a million decisions that any employee can make. When a manager occupies their mind with these decisions, it's similar to running some sort of program on a computer, like an unnecessary program. You know, when a program freezes or something, consuming all resources and everything slows down, the same happens without delegation. The leader is busy with some kind of table or routine work. There is a lot that needs to be entered into the computer and anyone could do it, but the leader is occupied with this. It is also interesting about practice. And John, now everyone wants to be flexible. Everyone wants to learn at these companies. These companies operate on agile principles. There, the development team works very autonomously, because when they enter a sprint, they work completely independently. Only when the sprint ends do they report to the product owner about what they have done. A sprint is a week, 2 weeks to a month. They have complete autonomy. Without such autonomy, without such delegation, Agile simply wouldn't exist. What are the myths? Why managers do not delegate well if you are a manager? Surely these myths are present in your mindset. If you are an employee, you probably observe these myths in your managers. So myth number 1, I will do it better and faster than the employees. This is not true. Or in the initial stage, maybe, but there is always someone who can surpass us in something. We can be good at many things, but in something specific, for example, only Excel, someone might be better and faster and more efficient, only analytics, only negotiations, only translation, only strategy development, or something else. That is, we won't necessarily be the best at everything, not necessarily faster. Initially, yes, but every employee has a chance. If an employee has the necessary talent, they can surpass us in some one type of activity. Therefore, employee development training allows people to develop in specific narrow areas better than we can ourselves. And then we are only as strong as our employees. Moving on to myth 2, employees are overloaded. The manager thinks, I can't delegate. I have, of course, some important task, but all my people are busy. Yes, no, actually, there is no such concept as overloaded. There is the concept of being loaded. That is, again, who is loaded? To what extent? Is everyone equally loaded, or is someone heavily overloaded and someone underloaded? You can optimize the workload, for example, with a responsibility distribution matrix once, and matrix we will not be talking about either. Myth 3, delegation reduces control. Well, actually, that's not the case. Delegating does not mean you lose control. You can use a KPI system and set goals via SMART, and the control of achieving set deadlines and targets will not go anywhere from you. The reason for all these myths is the fear of losing control, and again, this is resolved through the implementation of modern control tools. Yes, there are a lot of tools like Mandy, Click at People, Force, all within such CRM systems, task management, but there are so many that it's easy to keep a finger on the pulse and see what's happening. Trello, for example, yes. What happens next? Myth 4. Delegation increases execution time in reality. Effective delegation through clear task setting with specific deadlines does not increase time and may even reduce it, because an individual employee assigned to a task might be less loaded than a manager. Here is An example from Netflix. Delegation as a way to increase flexibility and responsibility in the team. Yes, the Netflix team realized at some point that it is impossible to control everything and people need to be given complete freedom. So they found a way to remove all kinds of control over employees and give them complete freedom. Thanks to this, they managed to develop so quickly, surpass all other video services, and become number one. This is well described in books about Netflix, for example. There is a book called No Rules Rules, part of which is the delegation system. Furthermore, the reason why delegation does not occur is a lack of trust in the team's competencies. This can also be resolved by implementing coaching. If employees are developed, the team will be able to accomplish any tasks. Myth 5. Delegation requires constant supervision. In reality, this is not true. The same Scrum methodology does not require the product owner to supervise the team every day. Yes, there is a system of evaluating results. Based on the results of the sprint, there's a sprint review where feedback can be given and some conclusions made. Moving on to how to correctly formulate tasks, the simplest way is when something is delegated, it's important to use the SMART principle because sometimes people delegate something very abstract, meaning we use delegation when we clearly articulate exactly what we want the employee to do, setting quantitative and qualitative metrics. We check to ensure this task is achievable and feasible, that it is relevant, and that deadlines are agreed upon. In general, even such a simple principle as SMART allows us to achieve results. Here are examples. Task formulations according to SMART increase sales by 10% by the end of the quarter. Through improving work with current clients, develop a new product line by January 1st, 2025 using innovative materials. Here, more global goals are indicated, but SMART principles also apply to very specific short-term tasks. Eisenhower matrix. If you've ever thought about time management, you've probably come across the Eisenhower matrix where one of the quadrants specifically says to delegate. Every manager has 4 types of tasks. Urgent, important, need to be done. Non-urgent, important, need to be postponed. Urgent, not important, delegate. Non-urgent, not important, decline. So thanks to these 2 things, there will be more time for non-urgent, important matters. And because more time will be spent here, there will be less need to deal with urgent, important things. In general, the Eisenhower matrix can be used every day for planning your tasks. There will be a table example via the link where you can evaluate all of this and plan actions. For the practical application of the method, using an example. A manager allocates tasks for the week using the Eisenhower matrix. Non-urgent tasks are delegated to the team through Trello, for example, with set deadlines. Urgent and important tasks remain the focus of the manager for immediate resolution. The consequences of the lack of delegation for leaders and teams. Firstly, when leaders do not delegate, over time they start to experience stress and burnout. And this leads to a drop in productivity or even sometimes the desire to simply leave the company because I can no longer handle it. Symptoms. Do you have burnout? If you are watching this video on YouTube, press pause or in your personal account. You will need to answer 7 questions, and for each question, choose a rating from 0 if it's never, to 6 if it's every day. Put a pause right now. I won't do this live, I'll move on. But when you watch the recordings, pause it. And here's the decryption. If you score up to 17 points, you don't have burnout. 18 to 29 points means you already have burnout and it's time to think about delegating. More than 30 points and you are already burned out and you need rehabilitation. Next, lack of delegation leads to micromanagement, which reduces both productivity and employee engagement and development. What do Gallup studies say? Low levels of delegation in teams lead to demotivation and high turnover. Yes, even the first question of Gallup's company engagement survey, I know what is expected of me. Company. It means that the leader clearly communicated not engaging in micromanagement, not dictating small tasks every day, but conveyed expectations and gave freedom. Next, Harvard Business Review. Managers who do not delegate often suffer from stress and reduce their effectiveness. In fact, once there was a legendary story in Harvard Business Review. It's even sort of a metaphorical tale about the manager's time and delegation. It is considered the best story in the world about delegation and principles. We will get to know it now. So, the article was called The Manager and His Time, or Who Will Get the Monkeys? Now we will try to figure out what those monkeys are about. So, the Harvard Business Review article says that subordinates always strive to shift their burden onto the boss's shoulders. But there is a way that allows the leader to set everything straight. A manager who lacks enough hours in the workday. Meanwhile, employees are often underloaded. The manager has many points of interaction. There is their own manager, other managers, and employees. The time spent on one's own manager is not controlled by the manager. It cannot be avoided and has the highest priority. The second time is the time taken by the system. This is work with other managers. If you don't interact with them, sooner or later they will stop interacting with you. Therefore, you also have to spend time on this. Well, finally, time for personal initiatives. It is very often consumed by employees. That is, employees encroach on this time and try to take it away, like children who try to take all their parents' time. If children cannot be interested in anything, they will cling to the parents there and spend the whole day with them. Balance. A manager constantly maintains the balance of all three types of time, but manages the balance by sacrificing personal time to a greater extent. And here everything depends on how much time he spends on his employees. Problem. Many managers spend an enormous amount of time solving their employees' problems. An author for Harvard Business Review called this the monkey on the manager's back. The monkey on the back is a problem that escaped from the employee and climbed onto the manager's back. Example. A manager is walking down the corridor, meets an employee. The employee says, by the way, we have a problem over there. The thing is blah, 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 blah. Listening to the employee, the manager realizes that, in principle, the problem can be solved, but cannot solve it right now. He says, okay, thank you for telling me. I'm in a hurry now. I'll think about it and let you know what can be done. That's it. They parted ways. Who is left with the monkey? At this moment, the monkey, which was on the employee's back, some problem, jumped onto the manager's back. What is happening at this moment? Essentially, the manager voluntarily takes the subordinate position of their subordinates. And some subordinates know how to skillfully take advantage of this. That is, they begin to manage their managers in this way. In our example, by a stick shape, basically, the manager did what bosses expect from their employees. He took responsibility for solving the problem and promised to report on completing the task. What will the employee do next? Keep track to ensure the manager does not forget. When they meet, they will say, so, how are our things going? What could the manager have done instead? Very simply say, okay, I'm busy. Write to me about it, I'll look at it and respond. Who would have the monkey then? Well, the employee would until he wrote it to the manager. Now, moving on. What if the manager has 7 employees? Each will give the manager one monkey. One during the weekly meeting, one during the one-to-one meeting, and one in the hallway or in correspondence. By the end of the week, the manager will have 21 monkeys. And when do you think the manager will deal with them? On weekends, which often happens to the manager on weekends. In solitude, they solve problems that need to be solved at work. At the end of Friday, the manager sits down to sort out the monkeys, and employees remind once more before the weekend that they expect the manager to fulfill their duties. Even from employees with whom I established proper management, regular one-to-one meetings, and effective management. I noticed that as they left on Friday, they tried to throw some work at me or remind me of something that depends on me, to report something about some problem. That is, people have this desire to go into the weekend free, without any tasks, without any thoughts. And they try to spread this to everyone around them, including the manager. What do employees say about the boss in such a case? That's where we have a bottleneck. He just can't come up with anything. It's amazing how such indecisive people manage to hold such high positions. Everything gets delayed because of him. I sent him something a long time ago and he still hasn't replied. How do the weekends go? The boss sorts out the monkeys, the employees take a break from work. What does the manager do to fix this? Really, he decides to eliminate the time in the calendar managed by subordinates. Well, that's figuratively speaking, right? And bids farewell to the monkeys. On Monday, employees are waiting for the manager to remind him about their monkeys. The manager meets with them one by one, places the monkey on the table to discuss it, and looks for how the employee can make the next move. Maybe let the monkey sleep on the employee's shoulders until the next meeting, if such a way wasn't found. That is, they can say, listen, it seems we didn't find a solution to this problem. You take it with you. And in a week we'll meet and continue our discussion. Now the manager controls their own time and asks the employees, so how are we doing? The manager can decide to permanently hand over the monkeys to the employees. In some regular one-on-one meeting, the manager says something like the following to the employee. While I am helping you solve this or any other problem, this problem never stops being yours, and only yours for even a second. Because if it becomes mine, you get rid of it and no longer need help. Well, in general, then the point is lost. When our conversation ends, the problem will leave my office just as it entered with you. You can ask for my help at the designated time for this, meaning regular one-to-ones. And then we will determine together what the next step should be and who should take it. In those rare cases, when it is my turn to take the next step, we will make the decision together. On one's own, I will no longer lift a finger. It is critically important for managers to have regular one-to-ones with employees, preferably weekly. This is an important condition for effective delegation. Levels of employee initiative. Employees can be different. Some employees wait for direct instructions on what to do. Some employees ask their manager what needs to be done. Some employees propose a plan themselves and then implement it. Sometimes an employee acts independently as the situation unfolds, asking for advice, and there is also an employee who acts completely independently, and at the end presents a report on the work done. Yes, you should strive not to have the first and second types of employees. What is important is to clearly agree on the level of initiative the employee will have for each issue, from the options provided, and discuss the date of the next meeting. How does delegation help manage stress and avoid burnout? So we have seen that delegation frees up time for strategic tasks, reducing operational workload. Similar to Agile, for example, you can assign a task to a cross-functional team, distribute responsibility, reduce stress. You can also use automation. We will talk about this in the course. Various tools really help. According to a Harvard Business Review study, regular delegation creates conditions for work-life balance for the manager, which also reduces stress. Homework assignment. There will be 3 options. The first is to formulate a task for delegation according to the SMART method. The second is to conduct an analysis of delegation. And the third is to think about barriers to delegation. They are outlined here. Choose any and complete it. What to read? The very article I mentioned, which we discussed today, you can read it in the original. What next? Next, we will examine the delegation process in detail. That will be our next lesson. Therefore, I invite you to take this course. See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching.